Howdy everybody, and welcome back to World of Warships with Bogatir. And today is a pretty big day because I'm getting my Montana. Yes, finally in a wargaming product, I'm actually going to reach tier 10 and take this sucker out for a ride. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. My very first game in the Montana. And thankfully enough, I got the North map, which is another one that I really enjoy. And it's a tier 10 battle, clearly because I'm in my Montana. Stunning commentary. So I cut off a little bit of the start here, and I'm going to be sliding over towards A and B on North because, honestly, the decap, as I said before on this map, is just a terrible choice. And hey, look at this. For the very first time on my first outing on a battleship, I remember to load AP. What do you know? Miracles will do actually happen. But the start of this game is relatively, uninteresting just because not a whole lot happens. Both teams are feeling each other out. Ooh, 1 over penetration on my first opening salvo. Great. Anyways, back to the ship. Now, the positioning of the American battleship line is a little bit interesting because there's a very steady progression of ships right up until you hit tier 9. And the Iowa comes into play. Now, initially, everybody's perception of the Iowas is that they were kind of the ultimate development of the American style of battleship, that they were the pinnacle of American battleship design, and that's not actually true. You see, the Iowas were actually oddballs in the American battleship line, because previously, prior to World War I, pretty much all American battleships had a speed of about 21 knots and pretty decent maneuverability. And the reason for this was that due to Mahanian philosophy of how you'd fight a war at sea, it was believed that there wasn't really any point in having a fast battleship because you were eventually going to be able to force the enemy to engage you, so why bother? Since they were eventually going to have to engage you anyways, you were better off spending your tonnage on guns and armor for when the battle actually was joined. And that was the way America built her battleships. Very slow, but very heavily armed and armored. And even when you came to the post-Washington Naval Treaty ships, the North Carolinas and the South Dakotas, you still saw that. While they did increase their speed, they only went to 27 knots, which was because American intelligence at the time thought that the Japanese battleships were going to be going about 26 knots or so, which actually turned out to be wrong. The Japanese battleships were even faster than that. But they increased the speed to keep pace with the Japanese, but only just. The focus of the North Carolinas and the South Dakotas was still very much all about the guns, all about the armor. But the fast carriers were starting to become a major factor in American naval thinking. And one of the problems with the current crop of battleships was that they could not keep up with the carriers. The new carriers were looking to be able to travel at 30 plus knots, 33 knots actually. And at that speed, they could just leave the carriers. They'd just leave them behind and that would be the end of it. And that's not good because we were worried about how are we going to protect the carriers if they could just leave the battleships. And so when the next series of battleships were going to be produced after the South Dakotas, the decision was made to essentially create sort of an offshoot, the Iowas, that these would be ships that are fast enough to keep pace with the carriers and could provide security for them, and they would be a fast battleship wing of the fleet. And that's what was designed. And with the end of the Washington Naval Treaty, America was actually finally able to build bigger than 35,000 ton battleships. And so the decision was made to go from 35,000 to 45,000 tons. Now, at the time, this got a lot of people hot and bothered because, you're adding 10,000 tons to your battleship. What could you possibly do with that? How much bigger are your guns going to be? How many more of them are there going to be? Holy cow, I'm a terrible shot. How much thicker armor could you possibly have? And everybody got excited. The problem is that as the Naval Board was designing the Iowas, they realized you weren't going to get anything. And as a consequence, the Iowas are more or less South Dakota class battleships that can just go 6 knots faster. And when the Iowas were first put into service, they were actually a bit of a disappointment to naval planners, because you spent that extra 10,000 tons along with all the associated cost and material and time and effort it took to produce this ship that was 10,000 tons heavier, and all you got for it was 6 more knots of speed. And one of my favorite quotes from Friedman, who sort of wrote the book on American battleships, is that at the time it was seen that was a heck of a price to pay. 10,000 tons was a heck of a price to pay to make these ships just a little bit faster. And the Iowas were a one-off. There wasn't actually an intention to continue that very fast battleship concept, which actually most fast battleships were seen to be about 27 or 28 knots, which kind of put the Iowas in a class beyond that. Getting off track. The South Dakotas were more or less the last traditional American battleship, and after the Iowas, the decision was made, okay, forget all this extra speed, let's get back to how we like to build our battleships. And so the true American battleship lineage is more or less North Carolina, South Dakota, Montana. And the Montana exemplifies this, because we went ahead and we added a 4th turret to the ship so that you'd have 12 16-inch guns. You added even heavier armor. You didn't bother with a ton of speed. This ship was entirely focused on having the most powerful broadside possible and the thickest, heaviest armor possible, because these were intended to, well, at the time not necessarily called out, but they were intended to allow the U.S. Navy to dominate whatever the Japanese were going to build. And even compared to the Yamatos, the the Montanas, by virtue of having 12 guns, actually had a heavier broadside than the Yamatos. When all 12 guns got fired, a Montana could put over, 16 tons of shells in the air at a time. It's just ridiculous. Wow, just like that hit on that Baltimore. Whew, he just disappeared. So yeah, the Montanas were the natural outgrowth of the American design philosophy, and it really shows, and it's why the ships are so much more capable than the Iowas in a direct confrontation. Now, they couldn't possibly keep up with the carriers, but again, not really the point. And so the Montanas I like them better than the Iowas. Like I said in my last video, I really did enjoy the Iowa as a ship, but the Iowas never really captured my attention growing up the way that the South Dakotas and the Montanas did. And it's nice to actually get to see Wargaming's take on the Montana, because the Wargaming modelers really did a fantastic job with a lot of these ships that never really got out of the conceptual phase. Now, there are some exceptions to that, like the Izumo is just ridiculous. It really honestly looks like somebody took the back of the napkin drawing that somebody made for the Izumo and then just modeled nothing but that. Whereas the Montana, they took the basic design of the ship and then they added in all the anti-aircraft guns and the radars and the extra superstructure and everything that makes the ship look authentic. It's fantastic. I love this ship. I love this ship. And I actually enjoy the way she plays, too. The lowered citadel makes it so that she can take a beating. Having 12 guns on tap is great. She's got pretty good angles with the guns as well. You can stay well angled and still make use of all 12 guns, which is not something you can do with a lot of equally ended ships. And, it's probably time that we paid attention to this battle, because now is when it actually starts to look fun. We control one cap. We're capping another. So this has primarily been about the gunnery duels. It's been about what ships have been exchanging fire and who's been winning that battle, which we have. And at this point in the match, I've got over 100,000 damage, which is not spectacular. but still pretty good. And now I see my opportunity. We've got a Montana, a Conqueror, and the Amagi all clustered up in here. And that Montana's on low health, probably not going to survive very long. And there's that Conqueror, which, oh, I hate Conquerors. I really honestly hate Conquerors. I mean, if you want to talk about brain dead gameplay, the Conqueror is it. Just load HE and just derp around, showering everybody with high explosive shells, setting everything on fire. That is just I still don't know what Wargaming was thinking when they added the Conqueror. It's just such a... I mean, look at this. The guy's sitting broadside. The guy is just sitting there broadside, accomplishing nothing, doing nothing, and 8,000 damage. And I actually had a shell shatter. On what? He's broadside onto me at 10 kilometers. What could possibly shatter my shell at that range? Oh, that ship is just broken. So the Hindenburg burns down the Montana. I can't put this Conqueror down to save my life. And the Amagi is starting to get my flank, which is definitely going to be getting me a little bit nervous, which is why I start to bow in a little bit. Okay, 10,000 damage, 3 penetrations, but still. You want to talk about not being able to citadel somebody? Yeah. 11 kilometers, I can't put one into this guy's citadel. Now this Amagi is doing a pretty good job, because he's given me, if this Goober and the Conqueror would actually do something besides just sit there, they could actually get me in a bad position where I can't properly angle, and they could really punish me. But the Conqueror just sits there, and so I'm able to angle against the Amagi, and I took some damage, but not enough to really matter. And we just keep lighting this Conqueror up, and he just will not die. He won't burn, he won't take citadels, he just... I don't get it. I honestly don't understand. Anyways, and he actually is starting to put a little angle on it now. And we're trying, and yeah, turned myself broadside into a torpedo ball. Yeah. Montana doesn't turn particularly well. Yeah, there we go. Oh, there we go again. That hurt. But thankfully my heal's almost off cooldown, so I'll be able to make use of that, and I can also make use of my damage control ability to stop the flooding. And there we go, the Hindenburg, again, the Hindenburg finally burns that Conqueror down after he took just a stupid amount of damage. But that's my kind of fight. That's what I like to do. And now I'm going to pass right out of the capture area without being able to capture it. But that's what I like to do in my battleships. I love to brawl. I think by this point that's pretty obvious. And that was a great chance to be able to just go in there and lead the team. And that's what you should be doing in a battleship. Bit of a broken record, but I mean, that's the whole point. You have the heavy armor, you have the heavy guns. And oh, as a battleship enthusiast, there's nothing like a broadside carrier at short range that you then overpenetrate with 3 shells because reasons. How often do you get this? 8 kilometers away, you've got a broadside carrier, and you can just put the shells into it. It's wonderful. Another brace of shells go out, and this time we hit him. I wind up with the Confederate. I've got 184,000 damage. Boom, 4 more over penetrations. I desperately want the kill. I also don't want to get killed because I no longer have damage control or healing. Just trying to shoot down as many planes as I can. But unfortunately, yep, somebody else gets the kill on the Taiho. Oh well. Still, it's hard to mope about getting 193,000 damage on your very first outing in a ship, along with a Confederate, a Dreadnought, and a Fireproof. Although, I gotta say, at this day and age, in this meta with World of Warships, at Tier 10, if you survive a match in a battleship, you are almost certainly going to get the Fireproof medal. Just everybody's trying to torch you up anymore. And still, 2 citadels. How many shells did I fire at that Conqueror's broadside, and I just could not find the citadel? God, I hate that ship. 2,500 XP, again, very first outing in this ship, and it didn't do too bad. Although that Hindenburg took the cake with burning those 2 Tier 10s down. So, damage was nicely spread around again. A lot of support from my team. but only a single kill against that Amagi. And still actually managed to turn a profit in a tier 10, 134,000 credits. That ain't bad. Gotta say, the Montana made a heck of a first impression. This has been Bonketeer. I'll catch you next time.